this. So yes, so there you go. Emily is absolutely lovely. She really comes fully present, tuned in with kindness, open-heartedness, and I'm just so thrilled that she's been a leader through through COVID. She's really stepped up and led. And of course, Debbie Bunker, amazing. To be honest, the whole Bunker family is like amazing. And I think her husband, David, I've known much longer because like the rest of you, he's been out there doing work in the community, serving on boards, serving with the most vulnerable people, advocating for as long as I've been a grown-up. So amazing. And of course, Debbie has been Worcester Public Schools. There's so much she's done. I've had students at Worcester State that interned under her and love her. So I've had this view of Deb that's more from people that really love her, and that's amazing. So I'm just so glad that all of you guys are here today to talk to us about what's going on now, what you've seen, all of that, because it really is traumatic to be going through what we're all going through now. Emily and I were talking about that when we were just coming in, that I do think it's helpful to hear that everyone's struggling right now, because how could we not be, right? And it's really easy to feel like you're the only one when you're not having opportunities to really see people and connect with them. But I can assure you, this is hard, and there's not a real easy end in sight. So things like this mean the world to me personally, and hopefully to other people as well, that we can come together and do what we can to get our community information they need, any information that's going to help them. The Worcester Addresses Childhood Trauma had a site visit from the federal government, and she said the same thing, like, we're all in trauma right now, and we're stuck. We can't hide from it. Like, we're faced with our stuff in a way at a level that we never have been before. It's really easy to just kind of busy yourself with the world around you and not reflect on what's going on in your life. And this has really made us all have to take a pause and look at our stuff. And for many of us, I think it's really challenging. So I'm so glad that Deb and Emily and Ann are going to give us some strategies and resources about it. So with that, I don't know which one of you guys I'm turning it over to first, but welcome everybody. I am very pleased to turn it looks like Emily, right? Because Emily just had that, like, it's me.
Very keyed in, Amy.
Yes, good. So turning that over to Emily. Thank you so much, Em.
Of course. Thank you, Amy, for those wonderfully warm, generous introductions. Hopefully we didn't set the expectations too high. But let me get our presentation pulled up and we will jump right into it. All right. Everybody can see this, right? Fantastic. I see some nods. So as Amy said, we are here to present on the trauma of uncertainty. So what does it mean to really not know much about what's going on right now, what's coming next, and how we can find strength and support ourselves and others during this time. So Amy gave those beautiful introductions. So I will just say, my name is Emily Swalec. I'm the program director of the Worcester Family Resource Center. And I'm here today with Debbie Bunker, who is our clinician at the Family Resource Center, and Ann Bureau, who has a long-held experience as the program director of the Worcester Community Connections Coalition, as the former program director of the Family Resource Center, and doing phenomenal community work. So we're going to start with a little bit about what exactly our programs do, and then move into a bit of an overview and conversation about what we're experiencing right now, and then come back to some of the concrete resources we can provide. So hang with us, we'll sort of come full circle on that piece. But the Family Resource Center, for those of you who we haven't had the opportunity to connect with before, is a state contracted program. So while we're part of UINC and an affiliate of the Seven Hills Foundation, we are also part of a statewide network of now 27 family resource centers in communities throughout Massachusetts. And we are state contracted to assist families with resource and referrals. What that looks like for us under, so to say, normal conversations is we really prioritize and focus our work on supporting families who might be at risk of, or have a history of involvement with the DCF system, or have a youth in the family who has juvenile court involvement, might be at risk of juvenile court involvement, or has a history of juvenile court involvement. But we are really here to support anyone and everyone in the community, and had pivoted recently, as Amy mentioned, toward doing a lot of COVID response work. So we've been partnering on some programs to deliver hot meals, to assist families with transportation, to do some immediate housing and shelter assistance to families who find themselves homeless for reasons related to COVID. We'll talk about that more later on in the presentation. In addition to all of the direct case management side of what we do, we also run a lot of parent and caregiver groups and groups for youth, really focused on how we put some of these strategies that we're going to talk about today into action, how we reflect on our own experiences, and how those impact how we show up in our relationships. And while a lot of those groups that we run typically in the program are focused on parents and caregivers, we know that many of those skills are translatable for any of us who find ourselves trying to support others in relationship with them, whatever that might look like for us. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to turn it over to Anne to talk about the Community Connections Coalition.
Hello, everybody. So Worcester Community Connections is one of 22 coalitions across the state, and our mission is to bring parents and providers and community leaders together to address some of the gaps in services that impact families, that can lead them to getting involved with DCF and other systems. And so we've worked with many of you in the community. Many of you are part of our coalition as far as we're concerned, on different task force groups, such as looking at youth homelessness with Lori Ross years ago, bringing parents together to look at the ESL system and bringing providers together. We have a parent action group for parents in recovery from substance use. So parents coming together with providers, looking at systems and where parents are running into barriers and getting the support that they need. We also put out different resource listings just to help parents and providers navigate all the resources and improve access to services.
Thanks, Anne. So Amy covered this, which is wonderful, and some of you have already been jumping in on the chat, but we would love to know, for those of you who are just joining, who's here with us today. So if you're open to it, we'd love to have you post in the chat who you are, your organization or role, and how you came to this training today.
Hi everyone, I'm Debbie. I'm just going to quickly review how we think it would be best for this fairly large group to communicate with each other and to participate. So let me just read these off. First of all, because this is a sensitive subject, if anybody is open to sharing some of their personal experiences, we hope that everyone will abide by confidentiality so that what is said here stays here. But we also hope that what is learned here leaves with you. We hope that you'll keep your microphone muted unless you're joining the discussion, or if you have a question. You can also use the chat for that. And we encourage, please, active participation. If possible and comfortable in your present setting, we'd love to see you on video. And lastly, if there's anything that we haven't already covered in these expectations or suggestions, if you would add them before we get started. Please feel free to unmute if you have something to suggest. Well, then I guess this covered the gamut.
Awesome, thanks, Debbie. So just jumping in to sort of start off our frame for this conversation, we wanted to offer this quote from the book Trauma Stewardship, an everyday guide to caring for self while caring for others. If you are not familiar with this book or have not read it, I personally would highly recommend it. But to start us off, if we lived in a society where all people were supported in the full spectrum of their feelings, if there were no right or wrong feelings for a given situation, and if, when one felt fearful, one could simply share that with others, receive support, and move through it, fear would have a different impact. So really, when we were planning out what we wanted to talk with all of you about today, we were really reflecting on, as Amy referenced to start us off, these feelings that we are really sharing some of these feelings of fear, of worry, of stress, of anxiety, of uncertainty. But many of us, because of our sociocultural location, our own past experiences, and what we've learned about how it is or isn't okay to show up with our feelings, may not feel like we have permission to check in with others, to even check in with ourselves about that sometimes. And so what we really want to focus on today is, how do we check in with ourselves about how we're feeling, use that as a jumping off point for checking in with others, and then what are some of the concrete resources that our programs can provide to support some of the experiences that might be triggering some of those feelings. So we wanted to start with a little bit of a temperature check of how everyone here is feeling today. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the emotions elevator, it is a concept from the Brainwise series of wise ways of thinking. It's targeted towards school-age children, but really applicable, I think, for all of us. And it's the idea is that all of our emotions have spectrums or levels that we can be at a really low level of an emotion, like stress, for example, or a really high level. And they rate that as 1 to 10, thinking about what sort of prompts us to move up that emotional elevator and how can we bring ourselves back down. So we'd love to just check in by hearing from everyone. How would you rate your stress level today on a scale from 1 to 10? You can show us your fingers on the screen. I'd probably put myself at a 4. You can post in the chat. But just to check in to sort of frame for us where everybody here is at today.
All over the map, huh?
Yeah,
Yes.
which I think is common, that we have our good days, our bad days, our in-between days. But we wanted to really sort of start off by checking in with, how are we experiencing stress right now and what does that mean? So I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to talk through what stress actually is.
So, stress in a medical or biological context is a physical or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension. Stress is caused by what we're going to call stressors, and they can be external or internal. And stress is part of the body's natural defense system and exists to protect ourselves. So if you can think back millions and millions of years ago to the first human beings who could only survive by immediate hunting and protecting themselves against being annihilated, our body's chemicals are still embedded in our version of the human body, where we can quickly react to different stressors in our environment, whether it's internal or external. So, for example, there's environmental stressors. An example of that could be going out into the sunshine, and that our skin will react to the rays of the sun, and they can our skin can get tough, our skin can get raw feeling, our skin can turn red, and we can experience an increase in heat emanating from our skin. And so our bodies are letting us know as we're starting to feel prickly or whatever from being outside, or numb from being in frigid cold, that we need to take care of it and go to another environmental situation. Social situations are impacted by stress. If we tend to be shy or self-conscious when we're about to attend a meeting or a gathering, our reaction might be to isolate ourselves a bit, to pull away from the group. Part of us might want to be in the group, but our stress level starts to increase and we just automatically resort to pulling away. Psychologically, we can be impacted by stress, and those are incredibly complex reactions. They can occur in our neurologic and our endocrinologic systems. They can result in exacerbating chronic health conditions such as diabetes or asthma or headaches. So those are just a few of the examples. And as has been implied, these are all along a continuum. So one of the things that we are suggesting today as part of this presentation is that it's really important for us to become much more self-aware of stress and being able to listen to our bodies. Our bodies, whether we are experiencing symptoms internally or experiencing symptoms externally, our bodies are giving us information. Most of us, especially with our lifestyles, especially with the demands on our lives, tend to ignore symptoms that could, if we pay attention to them, inform us about our stress level starting to increase, starting to go up the emotional elevator, and how, if we pay attention to these changes, we can address things in a different manner and be much more effective and much more satisfied. So running through some of these, what we would call red flags. Heart rate tends to increase. Body temperature can increase. Muscle tension certainly can increase. We could start feeling a dull pain in our heads. We could experience a sensation of being very tight and perhaps wanting to cry. We can feel a tightness in our throat. Our hands just automatically will clench in certain situations. Our jaw will clench. We can experience a tightness in our stomach or butterflies. It can certainly impact our sleep. It could cause us to suddenly wake up. An inability to focus. And in terms of psychological factors, we can start playing negative messages inside our heads. We can become more slumped in our posture, which further adds to muscle tightness. We can experience intrusive thoughts. We can experience racing thoughts, just going around and around. That can particularly happen when we're trying to so-called relax and go to sleep. So we're going to call all of these different kinds of symptoms red flags, just like the Coast Guard puts up red flags. I'm sure they're up on beaches today with the storms that are coming up the coast. These are symptoms that we need to pay attention to more religiously.
And
Next
these red,
slide. Yep.
Yeah. These red flags that Debbie just mentioned can be clues for helping us identify where we are at on that continuum of stress. And one model for thinking about this are these 3 increasing levels of stress. So acute stress, episodic acute stress, and then chronic stress. So thinking about sort of how we might move through these levels, and a single stressor can sometimes continue to persist and build upon these levels, and where we might enter into these levels may be different based on our present circumstances. But acute stress is a short-term, likely quickly passing stressor that typically is not going to cause any long-lasting symptoms, but definitely can get that stress system and some of those red flags going in the short term. An example of this for me would be right around this time yesterday when I looked at the clock and realized that Anne and Debbie and I were meeting at 2 o'clock to go over this presentation one last time, and that I hadn't finished my slides. I experienced some acute stress, but that was one of those sort of protective functions of stress where that got me motivated, that got me going to work on the presentation, and I finished what I needed to do before 2 o'clock. When acute stress starts to persist, perhaps we have some acute episodes of stress, but repeated over several days, that's when we start to be moving into that episodic stress category. This is where we might just start to see some more long-lasting symptoms because this stress is starting to persist for a little while longer. An example for this might be for those of us who are in positions where we might have had to attend a graduate program as part of our studies in order to become a clinician or take on another professional role. We might have experienced some episodic stress in our grad school programs. So perhaps around midterms, around finals, we've sort of passed that threshold of acute stress. That stress is persisting over some days or weeks as we prepare for those exams, try to finish up all of those papers, and that might be episodic stress. So this is where we might see some of those red flags persist a bit longer, some ongoing sleep disturbances, some ongoing changes in mood. But again, when we're in this episodic stage, it's still possible to sort of move back down this spectrum of stress and use some of the strategies we're going to talk about in a little while to calm ourselves back down and practice some self-care. The highest level of stress is chronic stress. And this is where we get really concerned about some persisting long-term health impacts like Debbie referenced, and are concerned about sort of what our approach is to addressing this level of stress, because what often leads stress to be chronic is that the stressor feels out of our control. And this is really, in a lot of ways, where we are potentially sitting right now, because we have a long-term stressor we're experiencing with the pandemic, and in many, many ways, it feels beyond our control. Chronic stress might also be something that we experience if a loved one is facing an illness that we feel like we have no control over how to deal with, how the course of that illness will play out, or how we can support that person. Chronic stress is also where we see some of the trauma response, where if a stressor remains chronic, that's where we might move into looking at some of those lasting mental health impacts of trauma, of depression, of anxiety. And the hope that we want to bring today is that even when we're sitting in this place of chronic stress, or there's a chronic stressor that we may feel like we have limited control over addressing, we can still be checking in with ourselves and practicing some stress management to address how we help ourselves sort of cope and persist and continue to survive under that stressor. And as Anne's going to talk about later on, if that stressor is preventable or removable, when we think, for example, about chronic stress caused by injustice, systemic racism, other systemic forms of oppression, how do we, as a part of our therapeutic process and self-care, engage in advocacy work to address that stressor and remove the chronic nature of it? So we're going to shift gears a little bit and watch a couple of videos that illustrate some experiences of stress. I'm going to stop my share momentarily to switch us over, because we learned yesterday that this worked more smoothly than trying to toggle back and forth. So as we take a look at these 3 videos together, keep an eye out for what red flags are you able to observe in the characters that we're watching. Where do you think they are on the levels of stress? And sort of how does this situation align maybe with what you've experienced, what you're experiencing right now, and what we've been talking about so far? So we are going to start with a quick clip from The Incredibles.
Bye. I want you back here by 10:30.
11-ish?
10-ish, heading for 9:30-ish.
10:30-ish it is.
Enjoy the movie. In the county of Nodoff, the Frubbers of Freak are all giving in to the sweet sucker of sleep.
We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image.
That's not the way you're supposed to do it, Dad. They want us to do it this
I don't
way.
know that way. Why would they change math? Math is
It's
math.
okay,
Math
Dad.
is math.
I'll just wait for Mom to get back.
What? Well, she won't understand it any better than I do.
The outer limits.
All over Dusseldorf, the Fribbers of Frupp are going to sleep because they just can't keep up. All over Dusseldorf, Dussels are dozing. Their eyelids so heavy, they're drooping. Closing! The point is, everyone's hitting the sack. Everyone's getting the sleep that they lack.
All right, so what did folks notice in terms of Mr. Incredible's stress level? I see some chronic stress showing up in the chat. So maybe if this is an ongoing situation where this is a repeated experience every night, some math anxiety, some fatigue. Some folks are saying episodic too, depending on, how long the situation has been lasting.
What red flags, internal or external symptoms, might you have observed in this clip?
See some sleep deprivation, raised voice is another one. Some anger. Thinking about those red flags, if you've been in a situation like this, how did you feel in your body? What might his internal experience have been? Posture changes. A lot of frustration. Yeah. And a great point about thinking about underlying issues too. So we're seeing one snapshot of one evening at home, but not necessarily the full context of what's going on for him internally, what not just has that day, but maybe that week, that month been like. Changes in tone of voice, crying. Yeah, these are great responses. So very much sort of keying into that question about what else might he have going on, where might his stress level be at more broadly. We're going to move over to a second clip from a little later in the film, if you're familiar with it, and check back in on how Mr. Incredible is doing.
Jack has powers?
Well, yeah, but...
You knew about this?
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell us?
I don't know.
We're your kids. We need to know these things.
Tell Mom?
No.
Why not?
Mom.
Your mother is not what we're talking
You
about.
would not tell Mom.
Because I didn't want to.
What?
Because it's
Come
not the
on,
time.
man. Why?
Because.
So uncool.
Because I'm formulating, okay? I'm taking in information, I'm processing. I'm doing the math, I'm fixing the boyfriend and keeping the baby from turning into a flaming monster. How do I do it? By rolling with the punches, baby. I eat thunder and crap lightning, okay? Because I'm Mr. Incredible, not Mr. So-so or Mr. Mediocre guy. Mr. Incredible.
All right. So, did folks notice, in terms of red flags, perhaps some physical changes from the first video to the second one? I see some nods. Huge bags under his eyes, difference in the whole face. Disheveled. Lots of folks keying into the tiredness. Yeah. And as we're thinking about levels of stress, what did you notice? A need for self-care. We have some fans of The Incredibles here too. Glad to hear that. Yeah, so I'm seeing some folks jump in that this seems more chronic. And I think that compared to the comment that someone made for the first video that we don't sort of know necessarily the full internal experience, in this video we have this indication that he's been keeping this big secret, and that could very well lead to some chronic stress of having to hold that secret and navigate hiding that from his family and how that situation is unfolding. Unrealistic expectations, yeah. So how much is he expecting he can hold and do and be for his family all at once? Inner peace, you are all right on track for where we're going next in this conversation. It is like you read our minds. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, since it sounds like you all have a fantastic understanding of those videos, we're going to turn to another Disney classic, Winnie the Pooh. And Debbie, do you want to give us a heads up on what we want to be looking for in this video?
Sure. So we're going to be seeing a scene that involves several of the Winnie the Pooh characters, but we're going to be zeroing in on two of the characters, Piglet and Rabbit. And the reason why we'd like you to zero in on them is because, first of all, it's funny, but also you could consider their personalities, their characters are possibly two different facets of what we might see in someone experiencing chronic stress. So what we'd like you to do is kind of observe the differences in the way they approach a situation.
Go look for something to get us out of here.
Okay. There might be something over by the pack.
Oh, thank goodness one of us is up there. I was worried we'd be stuck here forever.
Yeah, I found something. Here.
What?
Oh, well, that's a lovely flower, Piglet.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yes, Piglet, it's very nice. Perennial. But I think we need something longer.
Longer? Of course. How silly of me.
Oh, good thought, Piglet. But you can't possibly think that that's long enough.
Oh, yes it is. Hal read this to me once, and it was certainly the longest thing I'd ever heard. Oh.
It's true, Rabbit. It lags a bit in the middle.
Oh, of all things, why didn't we think to bring a rope?
Oh, well, there is this rope.
Spot on, Piglet! Do be a helpful little swine and get us out of here!
All of you?
Yes, Piglet. All of us.
All right. And 6. There. And now you can all get out.
How very thoughtful you are, Piglet.
Oh, good grief. Tie them together, Piglet. Can you tie a knot?
I cannot.
Ah, so you cannot.
No, I cannot not.
Not?
Who's there?
Pooh?
Pooh who?
No, Pooh. Piglet, you'll need more than 2 knots.
Not possible.
Ah, so it is possible to knot those pieces.
Not these pieces.
Yes, not those pieces.
Why not?
'Cause it's all for naught.
Oh, dear. I can't tie a knot. Oh, but there is something I can do.
Don't worry, Rabbit. Piglet's very clever.
I can tie a bow.
See?
Oh, for crying out loud, Piglet!
I know, Christopher Robin has a jump rope.
Ah, wait a minute. My gracious, that's it. Piglet, go to Christopher Robin's house.
Oh, I see. Yes, Piglet. Go and bring some honey.
Yes, bring some honey. No, the jump rope, Piglet, the jump rope.
With a little honey on the side.
You mean all by myself? Through there?
Yes, Piglet. Through a dark wood fraught with peril, on a mission of life or death. It is a task of great complexity, but I have full confidence that you shall return victorious and rescue us from the abyss. Go forth, Piglet, and we shall await your return, for weeks if necessary.
Owl?
What?
I can't believe how wonderful that speech was.
I can't either.
Move me to tears.
One little piece of information that might also be helpful for this scene is that just prior to all of the characters that were in the pit got there, it was only Winnie the Pooh was in the pit. And it was Rabbit's idea to tie something to Eeyore's tail and throw it down as a lifeline. I think it was an anchor or something on a chain, and have that be something that Winnie could climb up. And what happened was it was so heavy, Eeyore was pulled down and all of the characters were pulled down with him into the pit. So while you're kind of thinking about their characters, their ways of thinking, their ways of communicating, you can either throw them out verbally or put them on the chat. So one of the comments, besides people really enjoying this scene, is that Owl should be with Pig finding solutions. Why isn't he involved in this? And certainly that is something that I'm sure all of us are wondering about. Someone has noted that Piglet tries to assist in any way possible. I mean, he's just racing around doing anything anybody says. He's being very, very literal. And at the same time, unless someone is really directing him and being very, very specific, he can't follow through on anything very successfully. His thinking is totally clouded. He's definitely overly wanting to please. He's so caught up in his anxiety that he can't move forward really in any way. And in looking at Rabbit, Rabbit is very, very stressed, but he needs to have control. So he's exasperated. He's pulling his hair out. He's talking through gritted teeth. He tends to be sarcastic. These are not unusual. It isn't an unusual presentation. It's something that many of us also tend to do as we start going up the emotional elevator. But there comes a point where it's totally impacting our whole experience, and at every turn we are so tied into our need for control that we're not being successful either. So we're seeing one extreme in Piglet and the other extreme with Rabbit.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so glad to see all of the fantastic connections folks are making with this video clip, especially the idea that we've all been in this pit, but that perhaps our perspectives while we're there and the ways that we cope show up differently for each of us. So next we wanted to sort of move into, now that we have gotten some great practice sort of identifying how stress shows up, digging a little bit deeper into why we're feeling this way.
So with everything going on, this is such an unprecedented time, obviously, with so many stressors and so many levels, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. You know, no wonder we're feeling this in such an extent, and across the board as providers, as parents, all of us at the same time. And we're facing such questions as how long will the virus last? You know, how will my loved ones be okay? Not only health-wise, but economically. What public benefits will be there? And what if my financial situation changes? You know, school, it's a huge concern, and parents facing almost impossible decisions. And then where is there hope for change? You know, as Emily was saying, we feel this hopelessness and powerlessness because so many of the decisions can seem out of our range. So, you know, I think we can all acknowledge why we're feeling this at this time. So many stressors, so many layers from so many directions, so many realms, political, health-wise, economic.
So we had initially planned to move into some breakout rooms to have some small group conversations to share and hear all of your collective wisdom. How do you notice stress showing up for you? What do you do about it? But we learned just before the start of this presentation that if we were to do the breakout rooms, that would impede Worcester ACT's ability to record this and have this training available for folks who weren't able to join us to watch after the fact. So rather than breaking out into small groups, we are going to sort of move right into sharing as a large group. So we'd love to hear from all of you either in the chat, or please do feel free to unmute and jump in and have a dialogue with us. To start off, what is causing you the most uncertainty right now? What's showing up for you, your community, the communities you're working with, that you feel like is sort of moving you along these levels of stress at the moment? Always a little scary to be the first to jump in, I know. School and childcare, as Anne just mentioned, we are hearing that a lot in our world as well. Depression, anxiety, so yep, the ways in which this is exacerbating what might have been existing mental health conditions or eliciting new symptoms. Schools, okay, we're hearing some resounding school-related pieces. Helping others while struggling ourselves.
Yeah.
The timing, yep. So this piece of not only are we wondering about school reopening plans and childcare plans, but the timing of these decisions is coinciding with hearing case numbers going up. Isolation, loss, mixed messages, yeah. So we're hearing some inconsistency, that uncertainty that was our frame for the conversation today, the not knowing. Job searching, yep, those financial impacts that Anne referenced. Lots of feelings of unpredictability and lack of control, yeah. Leadership, yeah, I think that's a big piece, as Anne referenced as well, of feeling that decisions we don't agree with are being made and that we are not able to be a part of those decisions but are directly impacted by them. That inability to see loved ones. So I've seen a couple about the ways in which we are having to hold this and support others in holding this, whether that is in a professional role where we may care for others as a case manager, as a clinician, as some other sort of support structure, and within family units, so being a parent or a caregiver and having to support children and how they navigate this and cope with their feelings, perhaps being a caretaker to an elder or to another loved one. And we were curious to hear from everyone how you're noticing that impact, that this is in many ways a universal experience where we are all living through this pandemic. While we know that the pandemic is having a differential impact based on race, based on ethnicity, based on socioeconomic status and resources to which we did or did not have access to even prior to COVID exacerbating those situations. But seeing that we are having to experience this ourselves and support our families, our communities, our clients, for those of us in professional roles through this, what's that been like for you? I see discouraging, fear-inducing. Somber and joyless. Oh.
And I'm wondering if you are doing a personal check on the number of symptoms you might be experiencing, the number of red flags, internal red flags, external red flags. Is it affecting your sleep? Is it affecting your appetite? Is it interfering with the way you communicate with other family members? Because that's your unit right now. It's that's who you're with all the time. Do you find that any alliances with the characters you saw in the videos in the way that you're communicating with others?
I'm seeing quick to get emotional, sleep disturbances, cranky. Arguing. I think it's interesting and perhaps indicative of who of us are here as a group today doing this training, that folks did a really phenomenal job putting feelings words to what you're experiencing right now, a great array of feelings words, but aren't as quick to jump in with some of those red flags that might be physical symptoms. And I think that's something that we tend to see of. It can be easier in some ways for us to cope by sort of intellectualizing this and thinking about it and getting into our heads about naming the feelings and noticing how we're responding, perhaps emotionally or with changes in thought, but not as much being in check with our bodies. And that can be a really important part of understanding our stress response. I see that comment from Dora, we're too busy thinking about others to think about ourselves. I think we can all fall into that. Overeating and sleep seem to be coming up a lot. Are there other, as Debbie asked, sort of more on the physical side of red flags that folks are noticing? Over-exercising. Muscle tension, aches and pains. Yep. Feeling scattered. Yeah, that loss of focus of what needs the most attention when there are so many big challenges and overwhelming competing attentions. Napping more, migraines. Yeah, and not taking care of ourselves. Yeah, so what is the long-term buildup of some of these challenges? Because we're having this conversation now at almost the 5-month mark. I know when I think about when Debbie Ann and I were last physically in our office together, we're about a week out from 5 months away. So thinking about the impact of how long some of these red flags you're describing might have been persisting. And creating balance can be hard. That is a fantastic reflection and segue to where we sort of want to head. This next is hearing from all of you. What do you do about this? What are your strategies or practices that maybe you already drew on before the pandemic or have implemented recently? What have you tried that's worked?
Can I go ahead and share?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for jumping in.
All right. Hi, everyone. I think for me, what has kind of helped a lot is having a few constants in my life, in good times and in bad times. It could be like out of the values and beliefs, or also because of maybe like my religion also, because that's also something other people have their constants with. So personally, I try and reflect more on the fact that everything happens for a reason. And I try to keep up with that attitude that things may not work out, but they're happening exactly how they're supposed to. So they need me to have constants. Like, am I trying to stay positive? At times it's easier said than done, but it helps. It actually helps if you constantly keep reflecting on your values and beliefs. At times situations are extremely dark, but I can vouch for always trying to reflect on your constants. Yep. Yep.
Thank you so much. I think that was such a beautiful reflection on the importance of the spiritual philosophies that we hold. I think that also reflects back to what we talked about earlier about where can we help ourselves feel a locus of control, that you can control your outlook and how you're responding to this. And just thank you for sharing what works for you. And I see that so many folks have been jumping in with the chat about sleep, exercise, vision boards, gardening, connecting with a dog, doing things for others. I think that can be such a powerful one of promoting that sense of connection and feeling like we're giving back to the community. Music. Does anybody else want to jump in and share out loud with the group?
I think going back to thinking about balance is something that can kind of be a linchpin for all of us struggling in all of these different areas. And so if we can, first of all, give ourselves permission to get some self-care, that is the primary way that we can help others, is to tune in, give ourselves permission to tune into ourselves in order to get ourselves balanced. Then we can be much more effective assisting others.
And from Deborah's insight, I also think it's also good to always remember you cannot give what you don't have. So if you haven't worked on yourself, as she said, self-care, just release negative energy, because you need to have positive energy so that you can share, because definitely we don't want to share baggage. We don't want to share hopelessness. We want to share hope. We want to share, light in darkness. So I think that it's good to always remember that you cannot give what you don't have. So if you don't have inner peace, you can give peace. If you don't have self-love, you can give love. So I think in this situation, it's very important. I also saw someone share about trying to keep a vision board and all that. I honestly think if there is a year or if there's a season where you need to be flexible, and I think we have all been challenged as far as flexibility, it is this season. Because I know at the beginning of the year, we all have vision boards, but I'm so sure everyone's vision board did not stand a chance by the 3rd or 4th month of this year. So how open are you to be flexible and accept things that you cannot change? Anything you don't have control over, try and honestly let it go, because that's the best thing you can do for yourself. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
So,
you.
I think what I'm going to say is alongside of that, but almost in the other direction, sometimes it's just focusing on the things that you have control over that are like basics. Like if I'm having a really out of control time, I'm going to go weed. And I'm going to pull up like all the weeds in the garden because I can control that. And like I'm sitting here rolling yarn because it's a thing that I can finish. And like it's a thing I can accomplish. And when I'm done, I'll have a ball of yarn from the massive yarn that it was. And sometimes it's having those projects where it's like, this is a thing I can do right now. And if I can't always like do things about everything in the world, I'm going to do something that I can. And then I can be like, okay, I've done that and it's done.
That's a really great point.
Similar to what Liz, what everyone else has been saying, is be realistic with what you can do. I know people that are like trying to lose weight or trying to like get their life in order or trying to make big life decisions and big self-improvement campaigns. Like, good luck with that. Like, be a little kinder to yourself. Like, and like trying to set yourself up for things that you can really do. And of course, it's always easier to see when other people are doing that, right? Like when you see, wow, you really expect a lot of yourself. But yeah, you have to look at in the mirror as well as when you're out there giving the advice to people. Just that one's going out to you, Brittany, who said, it is hard to have compassion for yourself through this. And that's why it's so great that you guys are here talking us through this with the recognition that this is hard for everybody, and even with great coping skills, and knowing you're not alone, I think helps a ton.
Very, very true. And I appreciate all of your thoughts and insights. This is sort of a great setup as a segue. We certainly do not have all the answers or even many of the answers, but we wanted to present a couple of ideas. And the first is this framework. This also comes from trauma stewardship, but it is adapted from Bessel van der Kolk's work around trauma response. Most of this research, if I remember correctly, has been done with providers. So those who are holding, hearing about other folks' stress and trauma while perhaps dealing with the stress and trauma of experiencing that themselves. And how well folks cope with that can be broken down into 4 categories that might seem really intuitive, but are often harder to implement in practice. So the first one is that creating a sense of personal control. So just as Liz reflected, what are the things we can control that we can accomplish? And on the flip side of that, how do we have realistic expectations for ourselves about what we might not be able to control, and being able to accept that? Pursuing personally meaningful tasks. So those of you that talked about nurturing a new pet, gardening, journaling, some sort of task that can be a routine, be predictable, be something that you have control over, that really brings you a lot of personal meaning. Healthy lifestyle choices, another easier said than done one, especially in times of stress, as many of us reflected in the chat. But we know, we hear it a lot, that healthy lifestyle choices set us up to just be feeling better on the day-to-day. And then social support. So not holding these feelings or feeling like we need to experience them in isolation, having people that we can check in with, while that may look different during COVID, having ways that we do connect with others. I think even this training is a great example of being in community together, having this conversation about the ways in which we are all being impacted by these experiences and finding some support there. Debbie, did you want to jump in with some other strategies?
No, but I think that this framework, if we're waking up tomorrow and suddenly feeling a surge of stress, and I think one of the key things is to identify where we are experiencing the stress. Is it thought processes? Is it some kind of physical sensations? That if we can identify those first, it allows us to develop a plan to get some personal control. So for example, if we wake up and we know that we've been having some kind of racing thought, and we can identify that, and that the thought is causing us to feel frustrated and angry, maybe that's the first thing that we try to put some controls on, to do some problem solving in that area, to calm ourselves down enough so that we can think that through and address it, so that all of the other things that we're juggling can be handled. If we ignore that, everything is going to be problematic for that day. So if we can kind of keep these major categories kind of on our fingers to tap as part of the problem-solving strategies, I think we will all be in better shape.
One thing I know I've done, during this time, a feeling of lack of control, I've actually cleaned my basement, which was a mess. And that gave me a sense actually of control. This is something I can change, I can fix, I can clean. So in little ways, finding those things.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Reverend Payson, I see that you have your hand up. Feel free to jump in.
So, for me, one of the key insights is that almost all stress is based in fear. If the biologic response to stress is states of heightened arousal, right? Then the narrative begins in what do I fear? Is it lack of control? Is it failure? Is it judgment? Whatever it is. And so part of the issue of gaining a sense of personal control, I think, involves developing the habit of learning how to reframe your personal narrative in whatever situation you're in. Asking yourself, am I losing control? Or what do I have control over? Spending a moment thinking about what is it that I fear? And is that fear actually, is it going to manifest itself? Or am I replaying old tapes about not succeeding? I'm a firstborn, right? And so firstborns have their own challenges when it comes to meeting the expectations of others. And so I can, in my most fatigued moments, slip right back into those old tapes of I need to prove that I'm capable, right? Hopefully my adult self recognizes those as old tapes, and I can pull myself into a different frame in orienting myself to whatever it is. I'm mindful of an old story out of it's told about a Zen a woman who is hanging all her laundry out on the line, and it could be a Zen man hanging the laundry out on the line. Doesn't either works. All of the white laundry, and goes back inside and comes out and discovers that a pack of wild dogs has trampled all of the clean white laundry onto the ground. And the response that comes out of this person is one of chuckling and saying, my goodness, they didn't miss a one. As opposed to the reactive kind of thing which says, oh my God, all my work has been destroyed. I have to do it all over again. The ability to be able to observe and observe oneself, observe the environment, and to step back long enough to be able to say, I didn't have control over this. And what I do have control over is how I'm going to respond to it and how I'm going to engage that experience and how it impacts me. So.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's so important, those reflections on sort of what perspective are we bringing to the situation and what the situation is bringing up for us. And I think the pandemic has been such an interesting push and pull, as Amy said, I think way back at the beginning, of the ways in which this time in isolation, removed from sort of the busyness of our day-to-day lives, has caused us to reflect on internal experiences that we may not have reflected on before. But at the same time, many of those experiences, as you mentioned, are ones that have probably been with us throughout our lives that we learned very early on. But we may need to be drawing on ways to address those new ways of addressing them, because these circumstances are so different from something we've ever experienced before. But we can carry those lessons and those perspectives that have served us before with us. So to just quickly practice what this might look like, we wanted to invite you to join us in the present moment for a quick little exercise of one thing that you might want to try the next time you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed out.
So one of the key negative contributing factors that increases stress is our tendency to recall or re-experience emotions from past events, or to start anticipating future worst case scenarios. And with that, to experience a tightening throughout our body, kind of bracing ourselves. And along with that, oftentimes there are messages, there are statements that we play over and over again, and that impedes our being able to kind of work through our sense of loss of control. So research has pointed to the importance of practicing mindfulness, which is staying present in the moment. That when we can readjust our thinking processes to what is just present, our red flags, our symptoms can diminish. And once they are even somewhat diminished, it allows us energy to exert ourselves in a refreshed manner, and to handle our duties, our tasks, our relationships in a much more satisfying and effective manner. So if all of you will be willing to just participate in this little exercise, if you can resettle yourself in your chair, and at the same time, you can turn off your video and just listen. Allow yourself to kind of turn into yourself and not let any things that you are hearing or seeing in your environment distract you. I'd like to ask you to fill your mind with an image. Imagine a fresh, whole lemon, bright yellow, oval, shiny rind, and very tiny pores. Imagine holding it, feeling its smooth outer skin. Notice its ends where the stem attached and the other rounded point. Now imagine cutting the lemon in half across its wide middle. Examine the half lemon in the palm of your hand. See the rind at the perimeter, still bright yellow, fading to an almost pale white as it reaches the interior pulp. Look at each pouch of pulp, holding a droplet of lemon juice within. Hundreds in each division lines up in sections of a wagon wheel structure. Imagine a droplet of lemon juice touching your tongue. Bring the lemon up to your nose. Take in the fragrance of lemon scent into your mind. Allow all 5 senses to experience the lemon you hold in your hand completely. What's happening in your mouth? You've created an experience only in your mind. Your mind can take you where you need to be. Now, if you would open your eyes and come back on, let's spend a couple of minutes just talking about what did you notice? Were any of your senses able to experience the lemon? And how well was your mind able to stay focused on this guided imagery? Did you find that you were losing your attention and getting caught up with past thoughts or concerns about the future?
I see a couple of folks in the chat saying that you were really able to focus on nothing else. You really centered in on the lemon, that you could smell it, that you could experience the shape, feel the tingle in your mouth.
Yeah. How many of your jaws were starting to ache a little bit as if you had tasted some lemon juice? Now, why is this important? Because it just brings all of your imagination to focus on different sensations that are not part of your environment it heightens your ability to focus so that when you open up, when you're done, you might be able to clear your mind enough to put your attention to perhaps prioritizing some things that you haven't been able to do up to this point in your day. Do you have to have this script all the time? Absolutely not. What is useful, though, is to appreciate the opportunity to clear your mind of past stuff and future stuff and just take some time to stay in the present. And there are many different short guided images, imagery that you can access on your phone. You could zero in on some sounds if you go to the Calm app, which is a free app that you can get on your phone. So just taking a few minutes just to listen to some constant sounds that are appealing to you can help you get into your present mode instead of letting extraneous thoughts get in your way. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
All right. Well, if questions do come up, we will circle back to Q&A later. But for the last third or so of our time together, we're going to pivot a little bit toward thinking about what are some of the concrete material stressors, some of which have already been referenced in our time together today, and what can our programs, the Family Resource Center and the Community Connections Coalition, offer in terms of support for you, your community, community that you may be working with, and just go over a little bit more about what it is that we do on the day-to-day. Oh, one more closing thought. I forgot about this slide. We really liked this quick acronym reflection about 2 perspectives on fear and how we might reframe our relationship with fear. Because just as Reverend Payson insightfully mentioned earlier, what is really often behind a need for control is an experience of fear, a fear of loss of control, a fear otherwise that may have been brought up for us. And when we're experiencing that, we might fear everything and run, or we might see it as an opportunity to face everything and rise. So just a closing thought for the more feelings-oriented side of this presentation about, just as so many of you have reflected, this opportunity to reframe this for ourselves and shift our perspective. So moving into our programming on the Family Resource Center side of things, we have wonderfully had the opportunity to overlap with many of you before. So I'm really going to focus on what it is that we are involved with that is specifically responding to the pandemic. So we are working remotely, as I referenced earlier, not having been in the office with Ann and Debbie in many months now, sadly, but we are still open our normal business hours. So that's Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 for us. And our contact information is at the end of this presentation. And we are able to assist anyone in the community. So there is no charge for our services. There is no requirement in terms of age or structure of a family unit. Much of our normal pre-pandemic services and training was oriented towards families with minor children. So we are definitely a bit more well-versed in family-oriented services, but we are willing to help everyone, and if we don't know the answer, we will find it for you.
And you don't have to be part of a family either.
Exactly, yeah. We think about family and household as self-defined by whoever you consider, whether you are a family of 1, a family of 10, or anywhere on that spectrum. So we are part of the Worcester Together group, which has brought together a large coalition from the city, from nonprofits, from other community organizations to address the many facets of what our response to the pandemic needs to look like, and have received some generous funding through the Worcester Together group, which is a partnership of the Greater Worcester Community Foundation and the United Way to fund some of these programs. So a big one that is probably our most utilized service right now is that we are able to connect families to delivery services for food. So if you know of a household that is in need of delivery because they are COVID positive or under quarantine and are unable to go out and get food on their own, may not be connected to friends or loved ones in the community who can safely do that for them, we can connect them to delivery. So that is probably the number one reason that people are calling us right now, is because they are in need of delivery services. And we can include in those deliveries cleaning supplies, masks, sanitizer, everything that folks might need to safely quarantine, because we recognize that being able to do so is a privilege. Not everyone in our community equitably has access to those resources. So we are really trying to make sure that everyone who is in need gets what they need to be able to safely take care of themselves and their family. The next main reason folks are calling us is housing. So while the eviction moratorium is still in place, we know that that does not protect everyone depending on their living situation. And so we are able to help connect folks to shelter and help with long-term housing solutions too, like connections to rental assistance and housing search. We have done a lot of employment, job search, and assistance navigating the unemployment system recently. We do a lot of school support, both under, so to say, normal circumstances and right now. So whether that is concrete need for resources for remote learning, like technology, internet access, some troubleshooting around that, school support around special education needs. We have a staff attorney through Health Law Advocates, Mental Health Advocacy for Kids program, who's part of our team, who can get involved on the legal side of things if a situation escalates to that point and it's warranted. And we have a school liaison in our team as well, who focuses specifically on supporting families and school-related issues. Not to mention Debbie's phenomenal insight in her clinical work and past experience in the school system. We help broadly with financial assistance and benefit applications, so we can help families identify if there are financial resources to which they're not already connected or for which they might qualify for more than what they're currently getting. We've been doing a lot of transportation support. Some of you might know that we're in a partnership with Lyft, the rideshare company right now, where they're donating coupon codes that we can use to assist with transportation. We very often connect folks to legal assistance. Right now, a lot of that is around housing support and around unemployment applications and appeals. We are, as you might have guessed through our affiliation with UInc, very, very rapidly, for the most part, in spite of waiting lists, able to connect folks to mental health support. So we're here to make clinical referrals if that's something that's needed, and really try to support folks while they might be on waiting lists before they're able to connect to services. And then we do a lot of work around childcare and parent-child activities. So helping to access childcare, helping to access sort of parent supports, parent groups, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we run. And we actually have a parent workshop series running right now that part of this presentation is adapted from. So Debbie, do you want to make a little pitch for what that series is about, if folks might be interested?
Well, we have a 3-workshop series. Each workshop is independent of the other, but they are all nicely connected. We've had one already. We have one scheduled for tomorrow. We're offering it twice in the day, and we're also having our 3rd workshop a week from Wednesday, also being offered twice in the day. So if anyone has someone you know that might like to attend it, they're running for an hour and a half, and you can send us an email and we'll send you the Zoom code.
Can I ask both Emily and Deborah whether or not the Family Resource Center has considered talking with the school system? I continue to be concerned about the number of families who either may not have access to the appropriate technology or the knowledge for how to be able to utilize the technology. Both for the kids, not so much as the parents, in terms of being able to monitor and to be able to help guide processes that are being done at home. Is there any work being done in the city to establish a network of people who can assist families to be able to learn how to use the technology appropriate for kids to be able to do remote learning?
Yeah, that is a great question. And so I will say that there is an entire Worcester Together subcommittee focused on the intricacies of technology access and very much thinking about it in those three domains of having a device on which to do remote learning, having access to the internet, and then having the tools to actually be able to do that in terms of IT support. I see questions about translation services. We are still waiting for more specific answers on some of those pieces. We certainly can connect folks if they are still waiting for a device or without internet access. I think the actual IT support question is something that we are waiting for more guidance on as well, but that I know has been on folks' minds in the Worcester Together conversations. And there have been some really creative models for that. I know that in the spring, the Boys and Girls Club was doing some socially distanced outdoor IT tutorials. The Worcester Public Schools has said that they are working on a video series that will be available that will walk through some of the common functions of needing to use their remote system. But we are getting a lot of those questions. I think one piece that has come up particularly that I've heard often is that as more caregivers need to go back to work, if their children are not going to a childcare setting and being cared for at home, they're quite likely to be cared for by a grandparent who may feel even less comfortable or familiar with some of these technology systems. So it is something that is on our radar as a need. And if anybody who's on this group, because I know there are so many of us here and so much collective wisdom, has more information, please feel free to jump in. Okay, so we will keep folks updated on that. And I see some questions coming in as well. About, yes, language supports especially, I think, making sure that, when we think about, for example, those videos being available online for tutorials, making sure that translation is widely available. So we will certainly bring this feedback back to the Worcester Together committees that we sit on to be part of the planning process. I think that question is also a fantastic segue for Anne to share more about the Community Connections Coalition and some of the advocacy work that they do, especially with parent leaders in the community. So Anne, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions as well.
Hi, everybody. So we also wanted to talk about the importance for all of us of taking action at this time. And I know earlier, Emily had spoken about this in terms of, or Deb, about the piece of what we can have control over and where we can exert a little bit of power over our environment. During these unprecedented times, and you can go to the next slide, there's such a feeling of powerlessness and helpless and people feeling invalidated with their personal experience. Are people understanding what my family, I'm going through? And we can all feel like that. And so one of the things we want to talk about today is that by getting involved in your community or, with some community group or some effort locally, that can be so therapeutic at this time. It can give you some sense of self-efficacy, a little sense of your power. And with the Resource Center and Community Connections, we're sister programs, we strongly believe that community action is part of the continuum of therapeutic support for families. It's just as important therapeutically and psychologically for our families. We really try to encourage families to get the whole array of services, direct services, there, individual therapy and support groups, but also as piece of that to get involved when they're ready to do so and in their community. So we can go to the next slide. So as we know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to help people with their sense of wholeness and whole health for any time, the bottom is we want to address their physical needs, their the food, clothing, shelter, their sense of safety. But then as we go up the triangle, in the other realms are a sense of belonging, that I have a place that belong, that I matter, which is very important at this time of isolation. Some people don't have a strong family structure, they're isolated, or we saw in the chat many people can't see their family members in person for weeks on end. So to have additional places where they can feel like they belong, that they matter, and building up their social networks, esteem, so a place where they can get involved and again feel that sense of power, like I'm helping to do something, I'm helping to make a difference in the community in some way. For instance, I'm helping to supply a food pantry or a distribution center where they're giving out masks and gloves, whatever little way that is. And that all of this is part of the whole. Imagine if the Maslow's hierarchy stopped at the safety and there was no top portion, say this was all gone, families would feel so helpless and as victims. And so we want to look at this whole picture right now. So part of our community connection effort is to get community members and working in the community to help make a difference. None of us can address the community issues by ourselves. All of our voices are needed. It really does take a village. Some of the efforts that we're involved in are, there's groups, and this is part of a collaboration, so there are many players part of this. There's a group working on the bus system to advocate for the buses and making sure that they have special protocol in place to keep people safe during this time of COVID, but also to press for a zero fare system and improvements to the overall system. So that's a group that if anyone's passionate about the bus and transportation system, they can get in touch with us and we can help connect them to. There's also for parents in substance use recovery who are looking at ways to improve access to services for those families so they can strive and do well in their whole recovery journey. Some members of this group today are part of the undocumented working group, working to advocate and speak up for undocumented families at this time. There's a Latina action group run by Rosa Salazar that is speaking up about the needs of Latino families. So let me just give you a few examples. So, and then there's a parent action group. So imagine for, say, the parents in the parent action group at this time, and they were one of many voices who spoke up and said, we want to communicate directly with the superintendent. We want to raise the voices of parents at this time. So imagine parents being able to get on that call 2 weeks ago with the superintendent and personally ask her questions. What does that do for them in terms of their stress at this time, or sense of, gee, I do have a little bit of power. I can speak to the superintendent. That's amazing, at this time, amazing for all of us. And that the school is, we've advocated and that we've asked the school to hear the feedback of parents. Imagine parents at this time would feel so powerless and helpless, and imagine the group of parents that helped to put together a survey of parents that has now been used by Worcester Together to raise up the needs of parents, and that all of those priorities have been utilized by Worcester Together in deciding its different efforts. That's exciting for those parents. I think it's given them a real sense of peace and esteem and comfort during this time. There's a group working with the City of Worcester, Boys and Girls Club, and some local parents to develop a babysitting initiative right now to train up more utilize our youth to provide babysitting support at this time. So just a few of many different initiatives. And I know many people, Amy and others on this call, are involved in so many others. So please let us know if we can help connect you to some of the initiatives. It can be very intimidating to know, gee, how do I get involved? Or I'm so busy, I can only get involved so much. That's okay, even if it's one little way, one little initiative. I don't know if there's any comments on that. I remember, you know, in terms of politically, we can feel so like, what difference can I make? And I remember my aunt said, you know, gee, you can get involved as a volunteer in, you know, this is in my personal time, in supporting candidates in other states where they're needed. So there's so many different ways that we can make a difference at this time.
Thanks so much, Anne. And just in closing, we've got a little more than 20 minutes left. We wanted to open it up for any questions, reflections on any of the information that we've shared today, things we didn't cover that you'd like to hear more about. And I'll leave this slide with our specific contact information up while we chat. And feel free also to reach out after this training for anything you might want to discuss with us one-on-one. I know some of you are already direct messaging us through the chat, which works as well. And both of our programs are also on Facebook, which is another way to reach us and keep up to date with what we're doing.
If anybody has questions and they want to just jump in or type them in or raise your hand, anything will is fine with us. And yeah, so this is so great, like so helpful. And I love what you said, Anne, about getting involved at the political level. Sort of cause greater than self can sometimes be self-care, right? Like kind of using your own angst and feeling like you're doing something with it can make you feel like not only am I helping myself, but I'm helping other people. Anything that you're going through, you can be pretty confident that others are experiencing the same stressors, and anything you do to help is not only going to help you, it's going to help everyone.
Yep. Yep.
I think one of the challenges with advocacy right now too is that we're in the uncertainty. It's so hard to even really know what is best for kids right now, you know, like that's part of what we're sitting with. Like, we know that there's so much that they get from going to school. And parents need their kids in school for a lot of reasons, but if that is going to cause a, you know, kind of life-threatening pandemic spread, then that's so I think we're all really in this, what is the right thing to do? And there's not one answer, I'm sure of. Also, you know, every situation.
And even creating a group with some of your friends and colleagues, a small group, anyone can get a Zoom account. It's free, even though it's more limited, just to validate one another. Because you're right, Amy, we're all feeling that way. It's kind of just a day, sometimes a minute at a time, we're making decisions. So that's a little way we can get the support we need and feel like we're making a difference for ourselves and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thinking about specifically that school example, how we sort of use some of these strategies to cope with while we sit in this not knowing space of we are still probably, from what we know, about a week out from hearing from the schools what their finalized plan is. And even with that, have seen the reflections from some folks in the chat that as we see case numbers potentially going up, those plans could change. And so how do we support ourselves, support kids at home around the uncertainty that is probably going to continue in that situation from now until we get closer to the planned first day of school in September?
I love the babysitting piece too, because to some extent we are in situations where we're like, this is not ideal that older kids are taking care of their younger siblings, but it's reality. So let's equip them the best we can. Like, I think we find ourselves in a lot of situations that we know, our friend Beth Viets is like child development, and she's always talking like, now we're trying to get kids to do the things we've been saying they shouldn't do year after year, like get them away from the screen, and now like we're putting them in front of screens. So we know we're not doing all the right things and the best practices, but like that's what we mean by unprecedented. We really don't know what the right thing to do and the best things to do, and people are tired of that word, but there's really not a word that captures it better. We just, don't have the evidence base of when you're in a pandemic, the best choices. I do really appreciate that you guys took the time to do this, and the work you do bringing really concrete resources to people in the community, especially people that for any number of reasons are not as able to advocate for themselves as we'd like them to be. The resource is just unmatched, and we're really grateful. Delivering food to families with COVID, like that's awesome.
Thanks, Amy.
Anyone have questions or comments or want to jump in? And looks like some people jumped off already, but if you're still here and you'd like to let us know something you're thinking about or you want to share. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I do like that. Agree that it is nice to know that everyone is in a similar place and you really aren't alone. It can definitely feel like, we're all working to try to keep it together, but nobody's feeling super successful at that.
No.
All just doing our best.
Right.
Whatever that might look like.
I do hope that it helps people have much more understanding about mental health and the impact of, your environment on your mental health. We know that stigma is a grave concern to social workers, and now in this time there's no space for stigma. This is all of us. We cannot judge each other. We need to be open and honest and connected if we want to get through this. No shame in asking for help. Great, thanks. Looks like most people are just thanking you guys for your time. Yes, the Ann Bureau listserv is incredibly helpful. Very helpful. Yes, thank you guys. I'm so glad people found it helpful. I knew they would. I know that you guys are really in touch with everything that's going on for families and individuals, and just being able to give voice to that, so helpful.
Well, we really appreciate everybody being here today and sharing their insight, because as we have said many times over today, we don't have the answers of what to do right now, but we know that there's a lot of collective wisdom in our community of strategies that might work or things that have worked in the past. And we really appreciate everyone sharing their input and ideas and experiences.
It was wonderful. Thank you. Bob Bureau approves. Good stuff, you guys. It was great. And of course, the three of you have, I'm looking through the list, a lot of people I'm sure are here because of the three of you. You really are doing incredible work and helping people and building community. So we're really grateful. All right, well, I guess no questions. We can end on love. You guys are getting all this love from the audience and appreciation, and that's what we all need right now more than anything else. So
Worcester's great. Worcester's great. Worcester's the best.
Worcester's great. Thanks for bringing the
great
love.
People in Worcester. Great working with so many great people.
It really is. We're so grateful. All right. Thank you guys all so much. Our next training is going to be the SHINE initiative. I don't want to say trauma of adolescence, but maybe that is what it's called. I don't know what it's called yet, but their specialty is adolescent mental health. We thought that would be good timing right before back to school to really take a look at adolescent mental health and what's going on with it. So hopefully you can join us for the SHINE initiatives training. And I'll get this out as soon as the recording comes off the cloud. I know people that weren't here want to be able to view it and send it to other folks in our community that need to know about the resources. So super grateful to you guys.
Well, it's been great participating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, and thank you all for being here.
You too. Thank you.